Congratulations on 35 years of service, Finn. We're going to miss you around here. That was the last thing I heard before my wife stood up from her chair, walked to the center of the banquet room, and handed me a manila envelope in front of 73 people. My name is Finn. I spent 35 years as the senior operations manager at Ironwood Forge, a steel fabrication plant in Louisville, Kentucky. I started on the floor, worked my way up through every department, and retired at 65 with a pension, a savings account I built dollar by dollar, and what I thought was a solid marriage. Claire had been my wife for 37 years. We raised 2 children together. Tyler was 34. Brooke was 31. Both of them sat at the head table that evening, right next to their mother, watching her walk toward me with that envelope like she was presenting an award. I opened it slowly. The room was quiet. People assumed it was a gift, maybe a card from the family. When I saw the words, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," I didn't flinch. I read the first page, then the second. I could feel every set of eyes in that room locked on me. Claire stood there with her chin raised, arms crossed. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to crumble. I didn't give her the satisfaction. What I didn't expect was the sound that followed. Applause. Not from the crowd. From my own children. Tyler clapped first, slow and deliberate, like he was proud of what his mother had just done. Brooke joined in, smiling, nodding at Claire like she had pulled off something brave. The room stayed frozen. My colleagues, my friends, the men and women I had worked beside for 3 decades sat in stunned silence. But my family, they celebrated. I folded the papers back into the envelope, tucked them under my arm, and looked at Claire. "You have no idea what this is going to cost you," I said. She laughed. Actually laughed. Like I was bluffing. I wasn't. The drive home that night was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I just drove, thinking about every sacrifice I had made, every paycheck I deposited into our joint account, every decision I made with her comfort in mind. 37 years, and she chose to end it like that. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in my truck for a long time. The porch light was off. She hadn't come home yet, probably out celebrating with the kids. I didn't feel anger, not yet. What I felt was clarity, and that was far more dangerous. I met Claire when I was 27. She was working as a receptionist at a dentist's office, and I was picking up my younger brother after a root canal. She smiled at me from behind the desk, and I asked her to dinner that same week. Back then, I was still working the night shift at the plant. I didn't have much, but I had ambition. I told her on our 3rd date that I was going to be somebody. She believed me. Or at least she said she did. We got married a year later. Small ceremony. Her parents paid for most of it. I promised her I would pay them back. I did within 2 years, plus interest. That was the kind of man I was. I kept my word. When Tyler was born, Claire stopped working. She said she wanted to stay home with the baby, and I supported that. I picked up overtime shifts, worked weekends, did whatever it took to make sure she never had to worry about money. When Brooke came along 3 years later, I doubled down. I wanted my kids to have everything I didn't. Claire never went back to work. Not when the kids started school, not when they graduated, not when they moved out. She spent her days at the gym, at lunch with friends, shopping for things we didn't need. I never complained. I figured she deserved to enjoy the life I built for us. But somewhere along the way, the gratitude disappeared. She stopped asking about my day, stopped caring about the pressure I was under. When I got promoted to senior operations manager, she didn't congratulate me. She asked if it came with a bigger office. The kids followed her lead. Tyler barely called unless he needed something. Brooke only visited when she wanted money for one of her business ideas, none of which ever panned out. I gave them everything, and they treated me like an ATM with legs. I should have seen it coming. The warning signs were there. The way Claire talked to me in front of company, dismissive and sharp. The way my own children looked past me at family dinners, the way I became invisible in my own home. But I kept going. I kept working. I told myself it would get better once I retired, once I had more time to spend with them. I was wrong. The retirement party was supposed to be my moment, the celebration of a life spent building something. Instead, it became the stage for my public humiliation, and the people I loved most were the ones holding the spotlight. The morning after the party, I woke up early. Habit. 35 years of 6 a.m. alarms doesn't go away overnight. Claire wasn't in the house. She had texted me around midnight saying she was staying at Brooke's apartment. No explanation, no apology, just a notification that she wouldn't be coming home. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and read through the divorce papers again. Every line, every clause, every demand. She wanted the house. She wanted half the pension. She wanted alimony. She wanted the vacation property we bought in Tennessee 5 years ago. She wanted the savings account, the investments, and a lump sum payment to cover her transition into independence. I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Claire had never worked a day during our marriage. She had no income, no career, no skills that translated into employment. Everything she had, I gave her, and now she wanted to walk away with half of everything I spent a lifetime earning. But here's what she didn't know. 2 years before the party, I hired a financial advisor. His name was Gregory. Sharp guy, former accountant turned consultant. I brought him on because I wanted to make sure my retirement plan was airtight. During one of our early meetings, he asked me a simple question. "Finn, is your marriage stable?" I didn't answer right away. That hesitation told him everything. Gregory helped me restructure my finances, legally, carefully. We separated assets that were solely in my name. We documented every contribution I made to the household. We created a paper trail that proved, beyond any doubt, who built what. I didn't do it to prepare for divorce. I did it because I wasn't sure Claire would still be around when I needed her most. Turns out I was right. When she handed me those papers at the party, she thought she was holding all the cards. She had no idea I had already reshuffled the deck. That afternoon, I called my attorney. His name was Douglas. We had met years ago through a mutual friend, and I trusted him completely. I got served at my retirement party, I told him, in front of everyone. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's cold," he said. "It gets worse." My kids applauded. Another pause, longer this time. "Finn, I'm sorry, but if you're ready to fight, I'm ready to help." "I'm not fighting," I said. "I'm finishing." I signed the papers that same week, sent them back to her attorney with no edits, no objections, no counterclaims. Claire probably thought she had won. She didn't understand. By signing without protest, I had triggered the standard division process, and when the courts looked at the numbers, they wouldn't see a marriage. They would see a one-man operation. And that man was walking away with everything. The weeks following the party were quiet. I stayed in the house. Claire bounced between Brooke's apartment and Tyler's condo, probably enjoying her freedom. She didn't contact me except through her lawyer, and those communications were brief and transactional. I spent my days organizing documents, meeting with Douglas, and preparing for the inevitable discovery process. Divorce, I learned, was less about emotion and more about evidence, and I had plenty. What surprised me was how quickly the people around Claire started pulling away. Her friends, the ones she lunched with every week, stopped calling. I heard from a neighbor that word had spread about what she did at the party. Apparently, humiliating your husband in public wasn't the social victory she thought it would be. Tyler called me once, about 2 weeks in, not to apologize, to ask if I was planning to cut him out of the will. "Why would you ask me that?" I said. "Mom said you might try to punish us for supporting her." I let the silence hang. Then I said, "Tyler, I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just not rewarding disloyalty." He hung up without another word. Brooke never called at all. She sent me a text that said, "Dad, I hope you understand why we did what we did. Mom needed us." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Meanwhile, Claire's legal team started making demands. They wanted bank statements, tax returns, property records, investment portfolios. Douglas handed over everything, exactly as required. But the picture those documents painted wasn't what Claire expected. The house? Purchased before the marriage in my name only, with money I saved from my first 10 years at the plant. Tennessee property? Bought with inheritance money from my father, documented and traceable. Pension? Earned entirely through my employment, with no spousal contribution. Savings? Built through decades of disciplined budgeting, all deposited from my paychecks. Claire's attorney requested a meeting. Douglas and I sat across from them in a conference room downtown. Her lawyer, a woman named Patricia, looked uncomfortable from the moment we sat down. "Mr. Finn," she began, "we believe there's been some confusion regarding the asset division." "No confusion," Douglas said. "The documentation is clear." Patricia flipped through the folder in front of her. "Your client claims that the marital home is not a shared asset." "Correct. It was purchased prior to the marriage with premarital funds and has remained solely in his name throughout the union." "And the Tennessee property?" "Inheritance documented non-marital." Patricia glanced at Claire, who sat rigid in her chair, jaw tight. "What about the pension?" Claire asked, speaking for the first time. Douglas didn't hesitate. "Kentucky law allows for equitable distribution of pensions earned during the marriage. However, given your client's lack of employment history and the absence of any financial contribution to the household, the court will likely award a minimal portion, if any." Claire's face went pale. "This isn't right," she said. "I gave him 37 years. "You received 37 years, I said quietly. "There's a difference." She looked at me like I had slapped her. But I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't insulted her. I just told the truth. The meeting ended shortly after. Patricia said she would be in touch. Douglas told me not to expect any more aggressive demands. He was right. The tone shifted after that. Claire's confidence, the same confidence she had when she walked across that banquet room, began to crumble. The deeper we got into the process, the more Claire realized she had miscalculated. She assumed that being married to me meant owning half of me. She thought that 37 years entitled her to everything I had built, regardless of her role in building it. She was wrong. Douglas laid it out for me one afternoon in his office. "Finn, here's the reality. Your wife has no employment income. She has no retirement savings. She has no assets in her name. The only thing she brought into this marriage was herself, and she's taking that with her. So what does she get? A small portion of your pension, likely around 15% based on precedent. Possibly some temporary spousal support while she finds employment. But the house, the property, the bulk of your savings, that stays with you." I nodded slowly. "She didn't know," I said. "She really didn't know. Most people don't. They assume marriage is a 50-50 split no matter what. But the law looks at contribution, origin of assets, and documentation. You covered all three." I thought about that for a long time. Claire had spent decades assuming my success was her success. She took credit for things she never touched. She spent money she never earned. And when she decided to leave, she expected to take half of everything with her. But marriage isn't a lottery ticket. It's a partnership. And she stopped being a partner a long time ago. Around the same time, I started hearing things. Tyler's wife, Angela, reached out to me through a mutual friend. She told me Tyler was panicking. He had taken out a loan against his condo, expecting to pay it off with money from the divorce settlement. When he found out there wasn't going to be a windfall, he didn't know what to do. Brooke was worse off. She had quit her part-time job a few months before the party, assuming Claire would have enough money to support her while she worked on another startup idea. Now she was scrambling, applying for jobs she didn't want, trying to cover rent she couldn't afford. I didn't feel sorry for them. I felt disappointed. These were my children. I raised them, provided for them, and they turned on me the moment they thought it would benefit them financially. That wasn't love. That was calculation. Claire, meanwhile, had moved into a rental apartment on the east side of Louisville. A friend of mine saw her at the grocery store a few weeks in. He said she looked tired, worn. She wasn't wearing the jewelry she used to flaunt at every gathering. Part of me wondered if she regretted it, if she lay awake at night replaying that moment in the banquet room, wishing she had done things differently. But another part of me didn't care. She made her choice. She made it publicly. She made it cruelly. And now she was living with the consequences. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out to rub it in. I just kept moving forward one day at a time, building the next chapter of my life without her. That was the best revenge I could give her. Not anger, not bitterness, just absence. The thing about being needed is you don't realize it until you're gone. And I was gone. 3 months after the party, the divorce was finalized. Douglas called me with the news on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting on my back porch drinking coffee, watching the birds gather at the feeder I had installed the week before. "It's done," he said. "Judge signed off this morning." "And the terms?" "Exactly what we expected. She gets 12% of your pension distributed monthly. No lump sum, no property. No claim to the house or the Tennessee cabin. Spousal support for 18 months, then it ends." I exhaled slowly. "That's it?" "That's it. You're a free man, Finn." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat there for a long time staring at nothing in particular. 37 years. Gone in 3 months. And I felt lighter than I had in decades. Claire's reaction came secondhand. Douglas told me her attorney called after the ruling, furious. Claire had apparently expected a different outcome. She thought the judge would see her years of sacrifice and award her accordingly. Instead, the court saw a woman who contributed nothing financially and expected everything in return. She tried to appeal. The motion was denied within 2 weeks. There was no grounds for reversal. The documentation was airtight. The law was clear. I heard she called Tyler crying after the ruling, told him she didn't know how she was going to survive. He didn't have an answer for her. He was too busy dealing with his own financial mess. Brooke stopped speaking to Claire entirely. Apparently, she blamed her mother for dragging them into a public spectacle that cost them their relationship with me and left them with nothing. The irony wasn't lost on me. A few people from the plant reached out after the divorce was finalized. Old colleagues, supervisors I had worked under years ago. They told me they were sorry for what happened at the party. They said it wasn't right. I appreciated the words, but I didn't need them. What I needed was peace, and for the first time in a long time I had it. I started spending more time at the cabin in Tennessee, fished in the mornings, read in the afternoons, made dinner for myself every evening, simple meals that didn't require much effort. I wasn't lonely. I was content. One evening, about a month after the divorce, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. "I didn't think it would end like this. I thought you would fight. I thought you would beg. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. I'm sorry." No signature. But I recognized the handwriting. It was Claire's. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and threw it in the fireplace. Watched it curl and burn until there was nothing left but ash. She wanted forgiveness. She wanted closure. She wanted me to tell her it was okay. But it wasn't okay. And I wasn't the one who needed to make peace with that. She was. A year after the divorce, Claire was still renting that apartment on the east side. The spousal support payments had ended, and she had taken a part-time job at a retail store to cover her expenses. The woman who once spent $300 on a single lunch with friends was now counting coupons at the grocery store. Tyler eventually sold his condo at a loss. He and Angela moved into a smaller place outside the city. He stopped calling me entirely. I didn't chase him. Brooke moved to another state. I heard she was working at a call center, saving money, trying to start over. She sent me a birthday card once, no message inside. I didn't respond. Claire's friends, the ones who had encouraged her boldness, disappeared one by one. Turns out people don't stick around when there's nothing left to gain. She learned that lesson the hard way. I ran into her once, about 14 months after the divorce. She was walking out of a pharmacy as I was walking in. She looked older, thinner. The confidence that had carried her across that banquet room was gone. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. I didn't give her the chance. I nodded once, kept walking, and never looked back. That was the last time I saw her. Retirement turned out to be everything I hoped it would be. I spent my mornings fishing, my afternoons reading, and my evenings cooking meals I actually enjoyed. I reconnected with old friends, men I had lost touch with during the busy years. We met for breakfast on Saturdays, talked about nothing important, and laughed more than I had in decades. I sold the house in Louisville eventually. Too many memories. Bought a smaller place near the cabin in Tennessee, closer to the mountains. The air was cleaner there. The noise was quieter. The life was simpler. People ask me sometimes if I was bitter. If I hated Claire for what she did. I told them the truth. I didn't hate her. I just didn't think about her anymore. She had given me a gift that night at the party, even if she didn't mean to. She showed me exactly who she was, who my children were, who I had been sacrificing for all those years. And once I saw it clearly, I couldn't unsee it. Claire spent the rest of her years living with the consequences of her choices. The public humiliation she tried to inflict on me became her own story, whispered about at gatherings she was no longer invited to. The children who applauded her cruelty grew distant from her too, each of them too wrapped up in their own failures to offer support. I didn't take pleasure in her suffering, but I didn't lose sleep over it either. Some lessons are only learned the hard way, and she had finally learned hers. As for me, I found something I didn't know I was missing. I found peace. I found freedom. I found a life that belonged to me alone, and that in the end was worth more than anything she could have taken. Your wife is seeing my husband. I looked up from my coffee. A woman had slid into the booth across from me at the diner on Colfax Avenue in Denver, and she said those words like she was commenting on the weather. My name is Gabriel. I was 33 years old, working as a project coordinator for Stone Pine Holdings, a commercial construction firm. I had been married to Megan for 6 years, and until that moment I thought I was just having breakfast alone because my wife had an early meeting. The woman across from me was striking. Dark hair, sharp green eyes, and the kind of confidence that made you pay attention whether you wanted to or not. She wore a fitted gray blazer and earrings that caught the morning light. "Excuse me?" I managed. "You're Gabriel, I'm Audrey, and your wife Megan has been sleeping with my husband Jason for the past 4 months." She tilted her head slightly, watching my reaction like she was studying it. I set down my cup. The diner sounds faded. The clatter of plates, the hum of conversation. All of it went quiet in my head. "How do you know who I am?" "I followed Jason one night. Saw him meet your wife at a hotel off Spear Boulevard. I got curious, started digging, found out who she was, found out who you were." She shrugged. "It wasn't hard." I sat there, processing. 4 months. That was around the time Megan started working late, around the time she stopped asking about my day, around the time I started feeling like a roommate instead of a husband. "Why are you telling me this?" Audrey leaned back, crossing her arms. "Because I'm done pretending. Jason thinks I don't know. Your wife probably thinks you don't either. I figured you deserve the truth, same as me." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to argue, to defend Megan, to call this woman crazy. But there was another part, a quieter part, that had been whispering doubts for weeks now. Months, maybe. Audrey reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She slid it across the table. On the screen was a photo. Megan and a man I didn't recognize, standing close outside a parking garage. His hand was on her lower back. Her head was tilted toward him, laughing. My stomach dropped. "That's Jason," Audrey said. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I pushed the phone back toward her. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. Not to her specifically, maybe to myself. Audrey studied me for a moment. Then she smiled, just slightly. Don't be sorry yet. The night's still young. The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. I met Megan when we were both 25. She worked at a marketing firm downtown, and I was just starting out at Stonepine. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, talked for hours on a rooftop patio, and exchanged numbers before the night ended. Within a year, we were engaged. Within 2, we were married. The early years were good. We traveled when we could afford it. We talked about having kids someday. We built routines, inside jokes, a life. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. I couldn't pinpoint when exactly. Maybe it was after she got promoted and started traveling more for work. Maybe it was after I got passed over for a management position and came home frustrated more often than not. Maybe it was both. She became distant. Not cold exactly, just absent. Even when she was in the room, she wasn't really there. I asked her once if something was wrong. She said she was just stressed. I believed her because I wanted to. The late nights became more frequent. The texts she answered in the other room. The way she turned her phone face down on the counter. I noticed all of it, and I explained all of it away. I tried harder. I planned dates she was too tired to go on. I bought flowers she barely acknowledged. I suggested couples counseling, and she said we didn't need it, that every marriage had rough patches. I wanted to believe her. Looking back, I think I knew. Not consciously. But somewhere deep down, I knew the woman I married had already left. Audrey watched me as I sat there in the diner, lost in my own thoughts. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I admitted. "But I'm not surprised either. That's the worst part." She nodded slowly. I felt the same way when I found out. Like I'd been holding my breath waiting for something I already knew was coming. "How long have you and Jason been married?" 8 years. We have a daughter. She's 5. Her jaw tightened slightly. That's the part that kills me. I didn't have kids with Megan. We had talked about it, but she always said the timing wasn't right. Now I understood why. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Audrey looked at me with something between mischief and resolve. "That depends on you." I raised an eyebrow. "On me?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping just slightly. "Forget her. Go out with me tonight." I blinked. "What?" She smirked. "You heard me." I should have said no. That would have been the rational thing to do, the responsible thing. I should have gone home, confronted Megan, demanded answers. I should have called a lawyer, started thinking about next steps, processed the betrayal like a reasonable adult. Instead, I said yes. Maybe it was the shock. Maybe it was the anger that hadn't quite surfaced yet. Maybe it was the way Audrey looked at me like I was worth looking at, something Megan hadn't done in a long time. "Yes," I said. "Why not?" Audrey's smirk softened into something closer to a real smile. "Good. Meet me at the Velvet Room on Larimer Street, 8 o'clock. She stood up, dropped a $10 bill on the table for my coffee, and walked out of the diner without looking back. I sat there for another 20 minutes staring at the empty seat across from me. When I finally left, I didn't go to work. I called in sick, something I almost never did. I drove around the city for hours, thinking about Megan, about our marriage, about all the times I had felt something was wrong and convinced myself I was imagining it. By the time I got home, Megan had already left for the day. Her car was gone, and the house was quiet. I walked through the rooms like a stranger, looking at photos on the walls, at the furniture we had picked out together, at the life we had built. It all felt hollow now. I found myself in the bedroom, standing in front of her closet. I didn't know what I was looking for. Evidence, maybe. Something that would confirm what Audrey had told me or prove it was all a mistake. I found it in a shoebox on the top shelf. Receipts from hotels I had never been to. A card with a handwritten note that said, "Counting the days until I see you again." No signature, just the initial J. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the card for a long time. 4 months, maybe longer. All those nights I thought she was working late. All those weekends she said she had to travel for a conference. All those times she told me I was being paranoid when I asked if everything was okay. Lies. Every single one. I put the card back in the box. I put the box back on the shelf. And I got ready for my date with Audrey. I didn't feel guilty. That surprised me. I thought I would feel something, some sense of betrayal to my own vows. But my vows had already been broken. Not by me. At 7:30, I got in my car and drove downtown. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. I found parking a block from the Velvet Room and walked the rest of the way. Audrey was already waiting outside, and she looked like the beginning of something new. The Velvet Room was a cocktail bar with dim lighting and jazz playing softly in the background. Audrey had chosen a booth in the back corner, away from the crowd. She had changed since the diner. Now she wore a black dress that showed she had put thought into this evening. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders. "You came," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I thought there was a chance you'd go home and do the noble thing, confront your wife, have the hard conversation." She raised her glass slightly. "I'm glad you didn't." A waiter came by, and I ordered a whiskey neat. When it arrived, I took a long sip and let the warmth settle in my chest. "So what is this?" I asked. "Revenge?" Audrey considered the question. "Maybe. Partly. But I've been thinking about it all day, and I don't think that's the whole story." She traced a finger around the rim of her glass. "I think I just wanted to feel something real. Something that wasn't pretending." I understood that more than she knew. "How long have you known about Jason?" 3 weeks. I hired a private investigator after I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. Hotel room one night, paid in cash. He said it was a business expense that got misfiled. She laughed quietly. I wanted to believe him, but I didn't. "And you've been sitting on it this whole time?" I had to figure out what I wanted to do. Screaming at him felt pointless. Filing for divorce without a plan felt reckless. So I waited, gathered information, and then I found out about you. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I watched you for a couple of days before I approached you. You seemed like a decent guy. Someone who didn't deserve what was happening to him. You could have just sent me an anonymous message." "I could have." She shrugged. "But where's the fun in that?" Despite everything, I laughed. It felt strange to laugh given what I had learned that morning, but it also felt good, like pressure releasing from somewhere deep inside. We talked for hours, about our marriages, about how we had each ended up here, about all the small compromises and quiet disappointments that had accumulated over the years. Audrey was sharp and funny, and didn't sugarcoat anything. She had a 5-year-old daughter named Ellie who was staying with Audrey's mother for the night. "She's the reason I haven't left yet," Audrey admitted. "I keep telling myself I need to have everything in order first. The finances, the custody arrangement, a place to live. But honestly, I think I've just been scared." "Of what?" "Of being alone. Of failing. Of admitting that I wasted 8 years on someone who didn't love me the way I thought he did." I nodded slowly. "I get that." She reached across the table and touched my hand, just briefly. But it was the first time someone had touched me with intention in months. "You don't seem like the kind of guy who wastes time," she said. "I'm not sure what kind of guy I am anymore. Maybe that's the point." She smiled. "Maybe tonight we get to figure it out." The waiter came by with the check. Audrey paid before I could reach for my wallet. I didn't argue. We left the bar around 11 and walked through the streets of downtown Denver. The air was cool and the city had that late-night quiet that made everything feel more intimate. We passed closed storefronts and glowing restaurant windows, talking about nothing in particular and everything at once. At some point, I realized I hadn't thought about Megan in over an hour. That felt significant. "Can I ask you something?" Audrey said. "Sure. When did you stop being happy?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to give her something honest, not just the first thing that came to mind. I don't think it was one moment. I said finally. It was gradual, like the temperature dropping so slowly you don't notice until you're freezing. She nodded. That's exactly what it was like for me too. Jason and I used to be good together, or at least I thought we were. But somewhere along the way, I became more of a convenience than a partner, someone to watch Ellie while he worked late, someone to manage the house while he traveled, someone to be there when he needed something, and invisible when he didn't. Did you ever confront him about it? Once, about a year ago. I told him I felt neglected, that I needed more from him. He apologized, promised to do better, and things improved for maybe a month. Then it went right back to how it was. She paused. I think that was worse than if he had just stayed distant. The hope, followed by the disappointment. It wore me down. I thought about all the times I had tried with Megan, the dates she canceled, the conversations she cut short, the way she always seemed to have somewhere else to be. I keep asking myself what I did wrong, I said, what I could have done differently. Audrey stopped walking and turned to face me. You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did I. They made choices, bad ones, and we're the ones left dealing with the consequences. She was right. I knew she was right. But it was hard to let go of the guilt anyway. My marriage is over, I said. Not as a question. As a fact I was finally accepting out loud. Mine too. We stood there on the sidewalk, two strangers who had become something else in the span of a single day. The city hummed around us, indifferent to our small heartbreaks. What now? I asked. Audrey smiled. Now we stop being sad about people who don't deserve our sadness. She took my hand and started walking again. I didn't pull away. We ended up at a late-night diner near Union Station. Not unlike the one where we had met that morning, but different enough that it felt like a fresh start. We ordered coffee and pie and sat across from each other in a vinyl booth. You know what I like about you, Audrey said. What? You haven't tried to fix anything. You haven't told me it's going to be okay, or that I should forgive Jason, or any of that nonsense. You just listened. Listening seemed like the right move. It was. She took a bite of her pie. Most men don't know how to do that. I thought about what she said, about what kind of man I wanted to be going forward. Not the kind who ignored problems until they exploded. Not the kind who stayed in a broken situation out of fear. Someone better. Someone who paid attention. We stayed at the diner until almost 2 a.m. The conversation never lagged. We talked about our childhoods, our dreams, the things we had given up and the things we still wanted. Audrey grew up in Fort Collins, moved to Denver for college, and never left. She worked as an interior designer for a firm downtown and loved her job even when the hours were brutal. Ellie is my whole world, she said. Whatever happens with Jason, I need to make sure she's okay. You will, I said. That's obvious just from hearing you talk about her. She smiled at that and something in her expression softened. By the time we left the diner, the streets were empty. I walked her to her car, parked a few blocks away. We stood there in the yellow glow of a streetlight, neither of us wanting to say goodbye. This was unexpected, Audrey said. Which part? All of it. She laughed. I went into this morning planning to blow up your life and mine. I didn't expect to actually like you. I didn't expect to like you either. She stepped closer. So what do we do about that? I looked at her. This woman I had known for less than 24 hours who had turned everything upside down. She was beautiful and complicated and carried her own wounds. But there was something alive in her that Megan had lost years ago. I think we see where this goes, I said. She smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. She kissed me then, soft and deliberate. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. Call me tomorrow, she said. After you deal with things at home. I will. She got in her car and drove away. I stood there for a while, watching her taillights disappear around a corner. Then I walked back to my own car and drove home through the empty streets. Megan was asleep when I got there. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and looked at her for a long time. The woman I had married, the woman I had loved, the woman who had chosen someone else. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt done. The next morning I told her I knew. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just laid out the facts and watched her face go pale. "Gabriel, I can explain." "Don't," I said. "I don't need an explanation. I need a divorce." She tried to argue. She cried. She said it was a mistake, that it meant nothing, that she still loved me. But I had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. I packed a bag, called a lawyer my coworker had recommended, and left. I stayed in a hotel that first week. It was small and impersonal, but it was mine. No pretending. No waiting for someone who had already left. Audrey and I met for coffee 3 days after that first night. Then dinner. Then a walk through City Park on a Sunday afternoon, while Ellie chased pigeons and laughed like only children can. I wasn't rushing anything, neither was she. But something was building between us, slow and steady, like a house being constructed on solid ground. "Thank you," I told her one evening as we sat on her back porch watching the sunset. "For what?" "For telling me the truth when you could have stayed silent." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "You deserved the truth. We both did." The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Megan fought it at first, then stopped when her lawyer told her she didn't have a leg to stand on. The evidence of her affair was clear, and she knew it. I saw her one last time at the courthouse after the judge signed the papers. She looked tired, thinner than before. The confidence I used to admire had been replaced by something hollow. "I hope you're happy with her," she said. The words were bitter, but her voice was flat. "I am." She flinched. I think she expected me to fall apart when she left, to beg her to come back, to prove that she still had power over me. But I had moved on, and that truth hit her harder than any argument ever could. Jason didn't fare much better. Audrey filed for divorce the same week I filed mine. He tried to reconcile, showed up at her door with flowers and apologies, but she had already made her decision. The custody arrangement gave her primary care of Ellie, and Jason got weekends. I heard later that his reputation at work suffered after word got out about the affair. Denver wasn't a small town, but certain circles talked. He lost a promotion he had been counting on. His friends stopped inviting him to things. The life he thought he had was crumbling around him. Megan's situation was similar. The marketing firm she worked for had a strict policy about workplace conduct, and apparently Jason wasn't the only co-worker she'd gotten involved with. When the pattern emerged, her position became untenable. She resigned before they could fire her. They had both gambled on never getting caught. They lost. A year after that morning in the diner, Audrey and I moved in together. A small house in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard for Ellie to play in. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Some nights, we would sit on the porch after Ellie went to bed, talking about everything and nothing. Other nights, we didn't talk at all. We just sat together, comfortable in the silence. I thought about how different my life had become. A year ago, I was trapped in a marriage that had already ended, just too afraid to admit it. Now I had someone who saw me, who chose me, who made me feel like I mattered. Ellie started calling me Gabe. Then, a few months later, she asked if I could be her other dad. I looked at Audrey and she nodded with tears in her eyes. "Yeah," I said to Ellie. "I'd like that." Work was good. I had gotten the promotion I had been passed over for before, and the extra responsibility suited me. I was building something, not just at the office, but in my life. One evening, Audrey found me standing at the kitchen window, watching the sunset paint the mountains orange and pink. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Just how strange life is, how the worst day of my life turned into the best thing that ever happened to me. She wrapped her arms around me from behind. Sometimes the door you didn't want to open is the one that leads you home. I turned and kissed her. And in that moment, everything felt exactly as it should. I had spent years trying to hold on to something that was already gone. The day I let go was the day I finally started to live.